All right, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we are live. Welcome to MCJ Report number 176. Now, you may realize that on tonight's show we did not have our usual introduction music, and that's because Facebook has taken some exception to it, and I have a suspicion has actually limited our. Oh, let's see. Sorry, let me just change something. I can hear myself talking, and that's going to be quite annoying. So let me just get rid of that. All right, I think it's gone now. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, yes, some alleged copyright business, which I believe is restricting our capability to reach a broader audience. So I've turned the music off tonight, so I hope that's all right. But anyway, I can see a bunch of you tuning in right now, so welcome to the show. It's great to have you on board here with me tonight. So please go ahead and share the broadcast. Get the word out there. We've got some interesting topics in store for this evening. And there's my friend Gina right there. Gina, how you going? Always very happy to see you. And there's Leonie, Andrew, Joe. I see a lot of my regular crew. I see some names that I otherwise do not recognize. So welcome to the show. And let's get stuck into it, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? So what are we talking about? What are we discussing on tonight's episode of MCJ Report? Well, a few things. We're going to run through some general news. We're going to be talking about the Moderna factory that has been set up here in Melbourne. That's right, and some of the associated costs. All right, so we'll talk about that. We're also going to be talking about the cost of living and how that is impacting everyday Australians. But it's actually not just here in Australia. It's all around the world, and so many countries are experiencing the same problems in relation to energy prices, food supply, fuel, inflation, and so much more. Rates. The government, of course, are misappropriating our funds for reasons that we can speculate on. Also, we're going to be talking about the NDIS. That's right, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Funded to the tune of over $30 billion per year, and the scope for exploitation, rorting, and corruption. That's right. Now, everywhere I go, and so many people that I speak to are describing the same types of problems when it comes to dealing with the NDIS, and the problems often seem to be along the lines of those who need the services the most are often those who are struggling the most to obtain the services. So if you've had an experience like that, then please go ahead and put your thoughts in the comments, because I think this is a huge issue and there's huge amounts of bureaucracy involved, and it's something that we really need to tackle, because of course, as taxpayers, our expectation is that our tax money is going towards those who truly need help the most, not lining the pockets of greedy people who, I dare say, have more than enough money in the bank. So what do you think about that, ladies and gentlemen? All right, so that's what's on the agenda for this evening. So we're going to get started with some news and general headlines. But before I do, once again, please go ahead and share the broadcast, get the word out there. It is all happening, ladies and gentlemen. There is so much to discuss. So let's get stuck into it. Alrighty, but before I do, let me just do one thing, and that is, of course, to plug our party, Freedom Party of Victoria. We are advancing in leaps and bounds, ladies and gentlemen. Every day we are growing bigger and bigger, and every day a larger amount of people are recognizing us, Freedom Party of Victoria, as being a true alternative for this upcoming election, a true alternative to Labor and Liberal. So the greatest way that you can take part in what we're doing in this monumental challenge to take on the big wigs in Spring Street is by becoming a member of our party. That's right, it's very easy. The link is in the description of this video. You simply fill out the form, you become a member, you join the team, and if you are feeling up to it, you could also become a volunteer and you can join us out on the street, because this is what it's all about. Community engagement, something that probably a lot of politicians know absolutely nothing about. So once again, the link is in the description. That is freedomparty.net.au. So go ahead and become a member today. Alrighty, now let's get stuck into some headlines. All right, so what do we have here? Moderna's Australian mRNA manufacturing facility set to become operational by 2024. Alrighty, so what's going on and where is it hosted? Melbourne University to host the mRNA factory. So Melbourne Uni putting their hand up and saying, yep, we are very, very keen to get started in this manufacturing process. We are a step closer, and this was published here by aumanufacturing.com.au just the other day. I'm going to read to you here. Agreements between the federal and Victorian governments and US-based biotechnology company Moderna have been finalised. The participants have announced with an upcoming site at Monash University to be built for onshore mRNA vaccine production and research. Okay, so we saw Melbourne Uni on one hand, but here Monash Uni on the other hand. Maybe both, I'm not too sure. In a joint press conference on Monday morning, Albanese and Dan Andrews said the finalised 10-year partnership would also see Moderna establish an Australian headquarters right here in Victoria. What are your thoughts about this, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think we need to be manufacturing this particular product here in Victoria? All right, so government very proud, as you can see, Victoria to become home of mRNA vaccine manufacturing. And this comes in addition to, as it says here, earlier this year, the Victorian government announced up to $400 million in funding for a, quote, new Australian Institute of Infectious Disease in Victoria to lead the fight against future pandemics, all right? So they're preparing for the pandemics of the future, so it seems. All right, so what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? We also know that the Australian government has put a tremendous amount of money towards this particular partnership with Moderna. And I dare say this may be the first of many similar projects to come. All right, now this is pretty interesting here. Who saw this? Raise your hands if you saw this. How ex-minister was blindsided by Scott Morrison's secret move. Very sneaky move by Scott Morrison, actually. Look at this. Secret move by former PM Scott Morrison blindsided ex-minister Matthias Cormann, who only found out when reading the newspaper. This is, this is pretty bizarre, actually. So the former finance minister was left in the dark that then Prime Minister Scott Morrison had sworn himself into his portfolio and was never informed of the secret arrangement. Bombshell revelations emerged over the weekend that Mr. Morrison had sworn himself in as a second health minister and finance minister in March 2020 via a secret agreement struck by Mr. Morrison and his then Attorney General, Christian Porter. So why might this be happening, ladies and gentlemen? Why do you think? Well, first of all, it's no secret that ministers earn a significant amount more salary on top of their base wage for simply being a member of parliament. Not too sure if the same type of deal applies to Scott Morrison, just putting it out there. And why would we even need a second health minister in the first place? What do you think is the real deal here, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think there was some type of salary incentive involved, or do you think it was completely innocent? I don't truly have the answers, but I think it's something very interesting to think about at home. All right, moving along to the United States FDA monkeypox update. FDA authorizes emergency use of Geno's vaccine to increase vaccine supply. All right, so I saw not all that long ago that the Australian government has committed to several 100,000 doses of the monkeypox vaccine, but monkeypox soon to be renamed. That's right. So we have here, World Health Organization renames monkeypox variants to dispel stigma and creates open forum for name change. All right, so we wouldn't want any stigma attached to monkeypox, would we, folks? And by the way, what does that even mean? Put your thoughts in the comments. All right, it goes on to say here, the World Health Organization is inviting the public to propose new names for monkeypox and has renamed 2 variants of the disease, according to a statement released Friday after weeks of criticism that the name has, quote, racist connotations and generates stigma. Now, monkey, I can't really make sense of it. And are they saying that it's what exactly are they saying here? Monkeys are being I don't know. Anyway, what do you think, folks? But apparently the WHO has opened submissions to the public. So if you would like, at home, you can jump onto the World Health Organization website and you can submit your own suggestion for what you think monkeypox should be renamed. Or if you have an interesting suggestion and you don't want to go to the World Health Organization, you can put it in the comments and have a nice day. Anyway, we've got some going on to some general news here. Extent of Instagram and Facebook tracking exposed. All right, this is coming from RT.com. Meta apps inject a tracking code into websites when people are viewing them. Instagram and Facebook apps track what people do when browsing third-party websites without their consent. No, big tech would never do anything without our consent, right? Or the government, for that matter. Anyway, it goes on to say privacy researcher Felix Krause has warned. All right, so this guy's a former Google engineer, and he wrote on a blog post on Wednesday that the iOS app injects codes into every website shown and uses a, quote, custom in-app browser instead of the built-in Safari to monitor users' activity. All right, so I think what this really suggests and demonstrates is that if you are using the internet, you are not using it in privacy. Those days are long gone, and whether or not those days truly existed is probably anyone's guess. All right, moving along to the Ukraine. Ukraine to legalize guns soon. The parliament may allow citizens to buy firearms to protect their homes, the interior minister has said. Okay, so Ukraine will adopt a law legalizing firearms in the near future amid the nation's ongoing armed conflict with Russia. Internal Affairs Minister Ndis, I can't pronounce his name, Monastyrsky told local media on Saturday. So what do you think about that? They're saying that Ukrainians should have the right to defend their personal homes. What are your thoughts on that? Put your thoughts in the comments. British energy bills forecast to go through the roof. They are set to cost Britons more than 2 months' wages next year, union body warns. All right, so we see these trends all over the world with costs of living. And of course, we see the rapid decommissioning of various baseload power stations. I wonder if there's any type of correlation there. What do you think? Put your thoughts in the comments. What do we have here? Moving along to Afghanistan. Women's rally violently dispersed in Kabul. Taliban militants fired into the air to scare away protesters who were demanding bread, work, and freedom. All right, so just demanding their basic human rights. And unfortunately, they've been met with some severe opposition there from the local forces. And there are the women there looking like they're running off, trying to run to safety, simply protesting for the very basics in life. And that's over in Afghanistan. Now, a stark contrast, actually, to, say, Afghanistan during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we have here, as it says, this is a picture of women in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. That's also where the protest was just recently, and it was taken during the 70s, all right? So as you can see, quite a liberalized country as it was back then. But yet again, this is just further evidence that all any country needs is a change of government one way or the other, and freedoms can be completely lost. And if anyone still thinks that Australia is immune to losing its freedoms, then I can't help you. If you can't figure out by now that freedom is not guaranteed, that freedom is not necessarily forever, then there's nothing I can tell you. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have friends in this category, don't give up on them just yet, but sometimes some people will only recognize the loss of freedoms once it's too late. Alrighty, so what do we have here? All right, so that takes us to the end of our little opening news headlines and articles. I'm just going to check on the chat to make sure that we are connected okay. All right, I can see Rumble is rumbling along there. There's Jefe Fumador, there's Mustard, Marianne, a lot of my great regulars. Great to have you guys here as always. And I can see that Facebook is online as well. Not sure if YouTube is working. Looks like YouTube might not be working today, but 2 out of 3 is not all that bad. What do you think, folks? There's Elizabeth there. Thank you for encouraging people to share the stream. There's Aaron saying smart cities are next. Well, they're actually already getting rolled out as we speak. There's June there. There's Sharon, a regular on MCJ Report. Great to have you. There's Vicky making some funny remarks there. Vicky, always great when you're on board. There's Peter Ben, also making some funny remarks. I endorse that very much. Sandra, and there's Kim. How you going? Alrighty, fantastic. So let's keep moving along, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? What do we have? All right, cost of living is destroying Australians' lives. That's right, and so many people are feeling it. Thousands, or probably hundreds of thousands of Australians have either met the criteria for living in poverty, or are very close to entering that particular territory. So I'm just going to show you a couple of articles right here. All right, so coming from the Herald Sun, this was today. Australians pay billions more on living expenses as cost of living skyrockets. All right, so they actually made a pretty good little video here. I'm going to play it for you, and it should come through on your end. Oh, what do we...
Aussie is spending 60% of their income just on household necessities. That's $788 more per person per annum, or a whopping $19 billion more Australia-wide. Australians are paying $5 billion more on food than they were a year ago. We're also paying the price at the pump. There's also an increased spend on a roof over our heads. That's both across mortgage payments and rent. Collectively, we're paying more than $1 billion for bare essentials like electricity and gas. We're also feeling the pinch for protections. Private health insurance has gone through the roof, costing us an extra $1.4 billion in the past year. Home and contents premiums have surged, as have car insurance policies, despite most of us driving and claiming less during the COVID years. By comparison, the Sydney Olympics cost us about $6.5 billion.
All right, so pretty concerning there, if you ask me, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, we know without any doubt that we do have a big issue with the cost of living, and mainstream media are very quick to point it out, but maybe not all that quick to actually identify the true reasons for why it's happening. It's quite clear to see that the widespread suffering of people in Australia due to the cost of living is a direct result of inept government and not fit for purpose government policy, which is again indicative of the fact that we need a major change in Australia, because I dare say that government policy has undermined our standard of living in all aspects of our life. All right, so I'm just going to read to you a few pointers here. It says here, with inflation hitting 6.1% and tipped to rise further, the cost of living crisis has prompted welfare groups to warn more Australians are falling into poverty every day. Almost 600,000 more people are living in poverty compared with pre-COVID-19 times, all right? Now, keep in mind that during the COVID-19 period, 100 new billionaires were created in Australia, and existing billionaires were able to rack on many billions more onto their wealth, all right? So the top end of town did very well. Of course, regular income earners and small business have been completely decimated and destroyed. So we're going to just take a bit of a look at a couple of things here. So we're going to talk about inflation just for a second. So this is the definition of inflation by the Reserve Bank of Australia. And then we'll have a look at a few reasons why inflation could be occurring here in Australia. All right, so this is rba.gov.au. How is inflation measured? Inflation is an increase in the level of prices of the goods and services that households buy. It is measured as the rate of change of those prices. Typically, prices rise over time, but prices can also fall. All right, so that's more or less what it is, but why is it happening? All right, so this is a really good article right here coming from mint.intuit.com, the reasons behind inflation. All right, so reason number one, increase in money supply, otherwise known as printing money. This is a very basic supply and demand principle, which absolutely dictates that the more money printed by a given government results in the devaluation of currency. Okay, so it's not necessarily that a hamburger went up in price. It's more likely that the value of our currency has decreased, which of course raises prices. Now, the rising in prices due to the increase in money supply and looking at inflation is not always in line with the rising of wages. In fact, often it's not, and this is a key reason why countries around the world have fallen into complete chaos. Venezuela is a prime example, all right? So reason number one, increase in money supply, otherwise known as printing money. Reason number 2, supply chain disruption. Of course, we've seen a huge amount of that over the past 3 years, not just internationally, but our own supply chains here in Australia. We've seen the mass closing down of some of our big food producers, of course, when various workers and companies were producing positive COVID tests. We saw huge disruptions to our supply chains, including our food supply chains. Number 3, government-sponsored unemployment. All right, so what does that make you think about? It makes you think about JobKeeper and JobSeeker over the past few years. How many billions of dollars went into that? So in addition, of course, to the thousands of small businesses going under and the countless amounts of jobs lost, of course, the government was providing this JobKeeper and JobSeeker service, further fueling the effects of inflation. So I hope that's making sense. And this is my speculation, by the way. So if you think I'm wrong about what I'm speculating, please feel free to put your thoughts in the comments. All right, number 4, poor government policies. All right, so who here thinks that Australia has poor government policies? I think we can almost definitely agree on that in regards to many different factors. And it's indicative through the privatization of various assets and institutions whereby we see the Australian taxpayer forking out for the stakeholders of private entities. I mean, Vic Roads is a recent example, but we can also look at here in Victoria, say, the Land and Titles Office or the Port of Melbourne, and the list goes on and on. We can also look at policies in relation to farming and water supply. All right, so these are some of the reasons behind why we're experiencing inflation. It's not just some type of random phenomenon that occurs overnight, and of course the politicians will never take any responsibility for the very sorry state of economic affairs in our country. All right, so inflation, right? Energy prices. It's all tied in together. Let's have a look here at energy. Australian wholesale energy prices in June quarter tripled from last year, market operator says. AEMO executive says the needs for renewables is, quote, urgent as, quote, failing coal-fired power plants and global gas costs cause prices to surge. I really can't read this with a straight face. So the executive here is saying, well, the reason why energy prices are so high is because we need more renewables and coal-fired power plants are failing. So what do you think, folks? Do you think this is an accurate statement? I mean, if we need more renewables, then why does the government find it so necessary to subsidize the renewable energy industry? If renewable energy was truly the answer, then why would they need exemptions and subsidies? Surely that particular sector would be able to stand on its own 2 feet. All right. Now, please don't interpret this as being against renewables or anything like that. Me personally, I am pro-energy, provided that it is cheap, plentiful, and reliable. Okay, those are the 3 magic attributes that we need with energy. If the energy is not cheap, plentiful, or reliable, then I say that we don't need that energy. And remember, one of the biggest driving factors behind quality of life, okay, and eliminating poverty, and we know that we see more Australians moving towards poverty, is what? Plentiful energy that is accessible and affordable by all. You know that here in Australia, we've got a major problem when senior citizens are going to bed at 1 or 2 p.m. in the afternoon because they can't afford to keep the heating on. All right, so I think this is pretty deceptive statements being made here by the AEMO executive. I'm just going to read you a little bit more here. It says here that AEMO's quarterly market dynamics report found average spot prices for electricity in the national electricity market, which serves Eastern Australia, averaged 264 per megawatt hour across the quarter. That's more than double the previous high of $130 in the first quarter of 2019 amid droughts and heat waves, and a little more than 3 times the average price in the June quarter of 2021, which was $85. Gas prices averaged $28.40 per gigajoule in East Coast markets, up 246% on 12 months ago, and almost triple the previous record of $10.74 set in the September quarter last year. All right, so Violet, the executive general manager, has blamed the price surge on high global prices for fossil fuels, outages at coal-fired power plants, supply issues, and the deepest cold snap to start a winter in decades. All right, so we know that here in Victoria, the government is very dedicated to shutting down our coal-fired power stations and is seeking to completely phase this particular method of baseload power out. So I do think that it is really an inaccurate statement being made by this particular company right there. All right, so moving along here, have a look at this. Concerns that rushing the exit of coal could threaten Victoria's ability to keep the lights on. All right, so pretty different tune, isn't it, from the headline here in The Guardian, moving across to the Herald Sun. Energy experts are warning that rushing the exit of coal from the state's energy mix could have dire consequences. All right, but according to the so-called experts and executives from AEMO, they say that it's actually the coal-fired power stations that are causing the increases in energy prices. So what do you think? Who's right? Who's wrong? Put your thoughts in the comments. All right, let's have a bit of a look down here. So there you go, coal-fired power stations. And yeah, it's just it actually boggles the mind when you think about it, that especially the government here in Victoria is so dedicated to rapidly stamping out baseload power without providing any type of meaningful strategy for replacing this vital source of energy at affordable rates. In fact, the government is demonstrating the opposite by having a propensity to provide subsidies and grants to the renewable energy sector, which I'm going to say it again. I don't care if it's coal or renewables. Energy sectors, energy industries, they must be capable of standing on their own 2 feet. They must be capable of offering a competitive product to consumers. Otherwise, they have no business of being in the market. What do you think? Am I missing something? Put your thoughts in the comments. Moving along here. All right, to make matters worse, the Greens are proposing the shutting down of all Victorian coal-fired power stations by 2030. All right, so just less than 8 short years away, just shut them all down. Don't create a plan. Leave Victorians in the dark. Send our energy prices through the roof, and good luck to you. Good luck to you. No wonder Victorians are packing up and moving to Queensland, where there's a much cheaper form of energy from the sun for heating. All right, so it says here, new bill also increased the state's legislated renewable energy target to 100% by the decade's end. So I think the Greens may have a bit of a problem with understanding the general needs of the general population and understanding that not everybody is having an easy time paying their energy bills. Shows how out of touch the party truly is. And I mean, they're just going to keep shoveling their preferences to the Labor Party. But the Labor Party, of course, tanking in popularity. I don't think the Greens and Labor are going to be a permanent fixture of Australia's future moving forward. When you've got these types of these drastic and reckless statements and proposals being made that are inherently anti-worker, anti-family, anti-home, because it affects our capabilities to work and run a family home. It's just, it absolutely boggles the mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, the time could not be more important for all people who love this state, who love this country, to get involved in politics. All right, so that's energy right there. And for the record, I am a staunch supporter of any energy that is cheap, reliable, and plentiful. That's right. The driving force behind a good quality of life and eliminating poverty is affordable and plentiful energy. Don't forget it. All right, moving across to food. Food prices jumped by 5.3% at Woolworths and Coles, according to UBS. New data has revealed that the cost of 60,000 grocery products at Australia's 2 major supermarkets have spiked by an alarming rate. All right, so we see food prices are increasing there. And there's no good reason for it, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. We have such tremendous food production capability in Australia that this is these price increases are absolutely something that shouldn't be happening. So there's a few reasons, of course, that contribute to these types of increases. Of course, we spoke about inflation before. We spoke about supply chain disruptions, but there's other factors as well. So what we're looking at here is the Register of Foreign Ownership of Agricultural Land. That's right. So, of course, here in Australia, we do have a very big agricultural industry, but the greater extent to which our agricultural land is acquired by foreign interests, the greater extent to which those foreign interests will have the need to keep their stakeholders happy and to keep the foreign boards of foreign corporations happy. And once again, who pays for the privilege of keeping those people happy? It's us, the Australian consumers. So the Australian government, coupled with the Foreign Investment Review Board, should not be selling our agricultural prime land to foreign interests, okay? Doing so only jeopardizes our supply chains and only puts at risk the affordability of basic food. It's completely unacceptable, and if I had it my way, it would never happen. All right, so what are we looking at right here? What are we looking at? We're looking at foreign ownership of agricultural land. I'm just going to read to you here, and this was a report published by the Foreign Investment Review Board. Okay, the board who, they really need to take the word review out of Foreign Investment Review Board, and they need to change it to maybe the Foreign Investment Rubber Stamping Board, because I'm just convinced that it's a bunch of people sitting around in an office. They've all got a rubber stamp, and whenever there's a foreign acquisition pending, they stamp it and say, have a nice day. Anyway, goes on to say here, the total area of agricultural land in Australia with a level of foreign ownership has fallen, all right, from 52.6 million hectares from June 2018 to 52.1 as of June 2019, all right? I do actually believe it's increased by then. As for the years preceding 2019, well, still waiting on those reports. Goes on to say, using the ABS measure of total agricultural land in Australia, the estimated proportion of agricultural land with a level of foreign interests from the 30th of June 2019 was 13.8%. That is absolutely massive, ladies and gentlemen. So should Australia undergo any type of future crisis, it's that 13.8% that could mean the difference of potentially living in poverty or not living in poverty. Goes on to say, the level of foreign interest in agricultural land has remained relatively stable over the past 4 years. Table 1 shows the proportion of agricultural land with a level of foreign ownership. Alrighty. Yeah, so once again, the government is not slowing down with the privatization of our national assets, and part of that privatization, of course, is opening our sovereign assets to a global market, whether it's China or some other country. All right, so moving across here, this is another reason that could potentially be behind certain rises in basic foods, and that is that between 2010 and 2020, we lost over 10,000 farms here in Victoria. Okay, so run out of business. There's a few reasons for why that may be. I blame it largely on the policy and essentially privatization of our water, which has enabled foreign investors, domestic investors, politicians, and the government to purchase huge amounts of water, both privately and publicly. And of course, we've seen various private investors holding on to that water until there's a drought and then massively hiking the price up, thus squeezing generational families out of their farms, and of course leading to further centralization of our food supply. So what we desperately want is decentralization, and we want a greater range of independent farmers and food producers in order for, of course, small business to thrive and in order to keep the market competitive. All right, so moving along here, it doesn't help when we have some of Australia's mining magnates coming into Victoria and purchasing huge amounts of farmland. I think it's quite opportunistic, and it's most definitely a practice that makes us very mad, especially in the face of so many small businesses being run out. And in relation to the water, if you'd like to learn more about water trading, the privatization of water, and how Australian water is sold to foreign interests, even in the event when our farmers desperately need that water, then you can go and have a bit of a read through the Water Act of 2007. I highly doubt that the government of the day truly consulted with those who work on the land before introducing and passing this bill. So something you can go and check out in your own time, the Water Act of 2007. I guess what I'm really trying to explain here is that when we look at the cost of living, it's not exactly a problem that has arisen overnight or as a direct result of what happened during COVID, although, of course, COVID has greatly sped up this process. Rather, it's been a slow process over the years that has, I think, further centralized the means of production within various branches of government, and as a result has created a breakdown of decentralization and independent independent businesses running farms and producing food and so forth. So I hope that makes sense, and once again, put your thoughts in the comments. One little thing here, of course, we have Register of Foreign Ownership of Water Entitlement. So this is just something the government should not be doing. I don't even think it's constitutional. I mean, how did we even allow for this to happen in our country? It's an absolute disgrace. But once again, this is simply further proof that unless we the people get involved, get our hands dirty, and we cycle out those in office who seek to only undermine our businesses and to undermine our freedoms, then forget Victoria. Australia, I say, will not be a country that people want to live in. Okay? It is incumbent on you, me, and anybody that loves this country to get involved. So don't sit around, get involved now. Alrighty. Now, here's just a couple of little tidbits as well to wrap up this past segment. 100 new billionaires produced over COVID, thousands of small businesses destroyed, large amounts of public sector growth, by the way. Andrews gave himself a pay rise and the government printed billions of dollars. All right, so you start to understand why life is becoming more expensive, and the reason for that is that we are governed by an inept, not fit for purpose government that is first and foremost only interested in feathering their own nests. All right, now let me just make sure that we're connected here. I can see that Facebook is all online. It's great to have you guys here. There's Kevin, Brad, Kim, Katerina. Looks like everything is running smoothly, and I very much like it when things run smoothly. So we'll keep this moving along because we're on a bit of a roll right now. All right, NDIS funding, winners and losers. Alrighty, so this is something that I think is very important to talk about. I've been campaigning all year. As many of you know, I ran for the Senate in the federal election, and now, of course, I'm heading up Freedom Party of Victoria, and we're having major strides. Now, everywhere I go, I meet people who require the services of NDIS or have family members that require services, should I say, that fall under the funding of NDIS. And so many people are telling me the same thing, which is those who need help the most are often not receiving the help they need in a timely manner. So why might this be, ladies and gentlemen? Well, the NDIS is funded to the tune of over $30 billion, yet people are getting left behind. But it's actually a lot worse than that, because we see that there are certain contracts involved in relation to this funding, and it appears that the $30 billion per year opens up the door to many opportunistic business people who'd very much like to take a slice of the pie for themselves, regardless of whether or not taking a large slice could undermine the needs of the vulnerable. And this is something that really makes me very angry. As Australians, as taxpayers, it is only fair and reasonable that we expect that our tax dollars goes to those who need it the most. All right, should not be lining the pockets of the greedy. So let's take a bit of a look here. So you might be hearing about this for the first time. So we're talking about the NDIS, right? The National Disability Insurance Scheme. So what does it mean? All right, coming from the horse's mouth. The NDIS is being introduced progressively across all states and territories. The NDIS provides support to eligible people with intellectual, physical, sensory, cognitive, and psychological disability. Early intervention supports can also be provided. Insurance. The NDIS gives all Australians peace of mind if they, their child, or loved ones is born with or acquires a permanent and significant disability. Says that it's not a welfare system and that it's designed to help people to get the support they need so their skills and independence improve over time. All right, so let's take a little bit of a look here. Lots of funding, all right, $33.9 billion. We saw this headline come out actually just, I believe it was today, yeah. So let's take a look at various ways that the funding could be or is getting exploited. All right, so how heartless organised crime gangs are targeting Australia's most vulnerable by extorting intellectually and physically disabled victims. Australia's NDIS is being rorted by criminals. All right, so criminals by textbook definition, but also I say criminals who wear suits who happen to be working for who? The government. All right, but we're going to talk about that in a second. Goes on to say, death threats and standover tactics are being used against disabled people. Criminal networks are taking up to an estimated $6 billion out of the NDIS. All right, pretty big money. Every dollar rorted from system is a dollar not spent on those who need it. Organised criminals are going after some of Australia's most vulnerable. Okay, so yeah, very, very bad. And it also begs the question, where's the checks and balances? How are these so-called organised crime gangs able to get away with taking, as it says here, an estimated $6 billion out of the scheme? Is it possible that they have some assistance from the inside? Wait, hold on a second. You're not meant to say that, Morgan. All right. I mean, think about it, guys. Who's conducting checks and balances? Who is conducting a review of the allocation of funds and where the funds are truly ending up? So as we can see, an NDIS task force has been appointed to hunt down organised crime groups robbing billions from disability clients. I'd like to see a task force organised to hunt down the criminals that work within the government and within Parliament. Who here would like to see that? Who here? Raise your hands. All right, well, I tell you what, it's a vision and dream of mine that certain politicians end up in jail for rorting the system and abrogating their duty of care to Australians, especially some of our most vulnerable Australian brothers and sisters. And I'm pretty determined to see that it happens. So again, if you want to see that too, then jump on board with us, Freedom Party of Victoria. All right, moving along here. All right, so we had a look at the sort of textbook criminal gangs, but now let's have a look at some internal stuff. And as the saying goes, many politicians are simply part of a quote legal gang. So what do we have here? Push to end quote jobs for mates in politics as National Disability Insurance Agency chair resigns. All right, so what do we have here? A new report has revealed Australian politics has a growing, quote, jobs for mates culture, but an independent MP says her proposed bill will put a stop to it. All right, so Australian democracy is being undermined by a group of jobs for mates culture. All right, I mean, Daniel Andrews, prime example, right? How many people does he have working in his office? But anyway, I'm going to keep reading here. Jobs for mates culture with 1 in 5 powerful federal government board positions held by a political appointee, according to a new report. No surprises there. Research from the Grattan Institute shows federal and state government boards, tribunals, and agencies are, quote, stacked with people who have worked in politics, right? No, the report must be wrong, right? Politicians would never give jobs to their mates, and they would never screw the taxpayer over, would they? All right, it comes as Ndis Napfine, a former Victorian Liberal Premier, announced his resignation on Monday as chair of the National Disability Insurance Agency. Well, I'm sure he got that job due to no other reason but his merit and capability to do the job the right way. Goes on to say that Mr. Napfine was appointed to the role after being nominated by then Disability Services Minister Linda Reynolds and was 3 months into his 3-year term in the role. All right, so yeah, good point, right? Jobs for mates. Anyway, moving along here. Government seeks advice on Hoffman post-NDIS board appointment. All right, so this is really interesting. I'm going to read to you here. The federal government is seeking advice about the appointment of former National Disability Insurance Agency Chief Executive Martin Hoffman to the board of a tech company that sells platform software to NDIS service providers. All right, so he went from being the CEO of the National Disability Insurance Agency to landing a job on the board of a tech company that sells their products to NDIS service providers. So hold on a second. I'm getting a bit confused here. This article by the Daily Mail, when they talk about organized crime gangs, are they talking about kind of like street level gangs, or are they talking about people like Martin Hoffman? I'm actually a little bit confused. So if anyone watching the show could clarify, please put your thoughts in the comments, because I can't really seem to identify much of a difference here. All right, it goes on to say here, Mr. Hoffman resigned from his, get ready for it, $720,000 a year position running the NDIA in June. $720,000 a year. That's insane. Think about it. NDIS funding, I mean, come on. Just as the Minister for Government Services and the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Bill Shorten, so Bill Shorten is now the Minister for the NDIS, was sworn in as part of the newly elected Albanese government. Goes on to say the resignation came just after a week after a massive security breach at a cloud-based client management system used by NDIS service providers exposed a, quote, large volume of health and other sensitive data. All right. So yeah, Mr. Martin Hoffman, he's done all right through the NDIS, not going to lie. That's him right there, looking pretty pleased with himself, and I suppose you would be, right? You've just made a ton of money and you've hopped from the CEO of the NDIA over to a tech company, and you're going to sell a lot of those products right back to the via the NDIS, and we've got some wages here. Now it's a little bit hard to see because transparency.gov.au, they don't make their website very transparent to view. All right, bad joke there, but I'm going to try and zoom in. All right, what do we have here? All right, we're looking at some wages for people from the executive leadership team of the NDIA. All right, so the National Disability Insurance Agency. So Mr. Martin Hoffman, as we said before, it's actually got his wage a little bit higher than what we just read. Well, his former wage, because he's stepped down, $757,810 per annum. All right, and I'm sure that he worked really hard for every dollar of it. All right, who else do we have? We got Mr. Hamish Ackman, Chief People Officer. All right, $478,919, almost as much as the Premier of Victoria, right? Or maybe a little bit more. Mr. Oliver Bladdock, $470,000. Mr. Jeremy Dean, $636,251 for good measure. And Marion Frew, Frew. I don't think I'm saying that right, but who cares? $480,947. Alrighty, so pretty big chunk of funding there going to the salaries of these people. So I don't know, organized crime gangs or something else. There's also the scope, and I hear this from a lot of my supporters, speaking about various contracts in construction that have been approved by the government using NDIS funding. So we see Innisfail, NDIS provider, Life Your Way to Service, My Haven Special Disability Accommodation. I'm not saying that this right here is a misappropriation of funds, but there's so many service providers out there, so many construction and development companies that are being awarded contracts via NDIS. It really makes you feel concerned in relation to whether or not appropriate checks and balances are being conducted. Because once again, when the government puts up $30 billion, it is only natural that the lure of that type of money will attract all types of people who are not thinking about providing services for our most vulnerable and are instead thinking about simply lining their own pockets. I think the dire need for very strong review and accountability is most definitely in order. Meanwhile, you can look up article after article of many of our nation's most vulnerable people being left behind. It's absolutely heartbreaking. We see patients getting stuck at transitional accommodation for an average of 6 months. Allegations of poor care, patients left soiled for hours at an SA government-run disability care centre. Funding delays keep NDIS participants in hospital months longer than necessary. Second mental health service in Gippsland closes in 2 weeks as Barrier Breakers shuts its doors. Yeah, so I guess just a reflection on our not fit for purpose government, and once again, a reminder that we need major change, not just here in Victoria, but across the entire board. And if we don't get this change, my very firm concern is that the government and many of their crooked associates will simply continue to rob the taxpayer blind whilst providing no type of equitable service or care for those who need it the most. All right, so that just about wraps us up for the show, ladies and gentlemen. Now, before I leave, if there's one thing you do today, then head on over to freedomparty.net.au, sign up and become a member. That's right. We know that the road to restoring dignity and standing up for small business and restoring our freedoms, it's going to be a long one, but my very firm belief is that it starts here, and anybody that cares about Australia, anyone who cares about upholding the decency and dignity of their fellow Australians needs to get involved. We have a great team. We have a great mindset. So guys, freedomparty.net.au, become a member. The link is in the description of this video. All right, so that takes us to the end of the show. I'm just going to read through some comments and see who's who in the chat section, because I always like having a bit of a read to see who's watching. There's Purple there, our great supporter from sunny Queensland. How you going? Not going to lie, I wouldn't mind a bit of Queensland's weather in Melbourne right now. It is absolutely freezing. Who here is sick of the cold? It is so cold. We could really do with some additional warming right now. All right, you see what I did there? There's Brian there. How you doing? Dan's worried about the independence. Dan Andrews should be worried about the Freedom Party of Victoria, because we're going for his seat and we are just going in with no regrets. Let me see. Looking at Facebook, I can see a bunch of people in there. There's Paul. How you going? Yes, that's a good point there by Kim. So the link to become a member for Freedom Party of Victoria is in the description of this video. But you know what? Share that link with your friends and family. Let's make our movement absolutely massive. Let's flood the streets with our members, with our volunteers. Let's connect with the community, because I'm telling you, I'm out in the community every day, and every day regular people going about their business, they know there's a problem. They know they can't trust the major parties, and they are looking for an alternative. That alternative is us. So get the link and share it with your friends and family if there's one thing you do today. There's Katharina there. You say you left Victoria because of Andrews. Well, I want you to come back, because guess what? Daniel Andrews' days are numbered. That's right. Susie Joy says, you've got no electricity and you can't get NDIS to help out. Oh, that is just terrible. Nobody in this country should have to live like that. It's because of terrible governance. I'm telling you that. Thank you, Sharon, for sharing the link there to become a member, so you guys can go ahead and sign up. And thank you, Chris, for sharing some links there. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap it up. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. You know what the deal is now. Every Monday, 8 p.m, MCJ Report live on 3 platforms. So stay tuned, because we have huge things in the pipeline. I'll catch you guys next time on MCJ Report.